Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I need to come up with a name, what we're going to call videos, based upon stories that everybody sent me. I must have gotten 100 copies of this sent to me in the last 36 hours. And it's a great story. It's a great story. And so everybody sent it to me. So I can't thank all of you. I haven't got that kind of time. But from thestar.com out of Canada, it is not a crime to give someone the finger. Quebec judge issues candid ruling in a neighbor dispute. And the judge cautioned that it is deplorable that the complainants have weaponized the criminal justice system in an attempt to exert revenge on an innocent man. Omar Mosla wrote this. And of course, they do say love thy neighbor. But also, feel free to give them the one-finger salute if the need arises. And again, this is in Canada, but it's very similar in America, but it's going to depend on where you are. That's the conclusion of a Quebec judge reached in a scathing ruling where he defends a man's use of the gesture in a dispute with his neighbor, declaring it a God-given right that is covered by freedom of expression. To be abundantly clear, it is not a crime to give someone the finger. Flipping the proverbial bird is a God-given, charter-enshrined right that belongs to every red-blooded Canadian, said the judge in his ruling last month. Again, it is a God-given right. It's like the 11th commandment. The complainants are free to clutch their pearls in the face of such an insult. However, the police department and 911 dispatching service have more important priorities to address, he said. The ruling comes from a quarrel between neighbors, including a man named Neil, who is the one who made the gesture, and Michael, who is documented as having called police numerous times for what he perceived to be threatening gestures or threatening behavior from his neighbor. So something happens between the neighbors, and one of them flips the other one off. The one who got flipped off calls the police and goes, "That guy threatened me." Now, police officers doing their investigation should ask, how did he threaten you? And if all he did was flip you the bird from afar, that's not a threat. That's not a threat. It's an insult. It's considered impolite, but it is not a threat. Big difference. The court document depicts an increasingly fractious relationship between the neighbors, with the issue of children playing in front of the man's home as the cause of friction. In his opening remarks, the judge describes a picturesque, blissful snapshot of a suburban utopia that the complainant took issue with. To the complainants, the presence of young families outside is a source of scorn and vivid resentment that ultimately spilled over into a criminal complaint against their neighbor. That's the judge writing. The discord between the two culminated in May of 21, where one of them is described as holding what appeared to be a handheld drill while standing on his front porch and making obscene remarks as the other man walked by. In response, the other man told his neighbor to F off and proceeded to give him the finger, which most people, I think if you said, what does that symbol mean? They will tell you that it basically means a two-word phrase, F you, not F off. But I suppose some people might say, no, I think it means F off. But the point is, it's not a threat. That's just an insult. Upon returning home, he found police officers waiting for him and was subsequently arrested for uttering death threats. Death threats. The judge ruled that giving someone the finger may not be civil, polite, or gentlemanly. It is protected by the freedom of expression under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He concluded that citizens are to be thicker-skinned, especially when they behave in ways that are highly likely to trigger such profanity. Not only did the judge acquit the man of criminal harassment, he also remarked that it's deplorable that the complainants have weaponized the criminal justice system in an attempt to exert revenge on an innocent man for some perceived slights that are at best trivial peeves, and that based on the video evidence, the complainant was fortunate that he himself was not charged with uttering threats. Meanwhile, an assistant professor at the University of Toronto and an expert in constitutional law said the freedom of expression is quite broad in Canada, and that while a gesture could technically be seen as a threat, a middle finger doesn't reach that threshold. Yes, you wonder what kind of gesture? Well, if I make a fist and gesture towards your face, that would be a potential threat, right? So if all the person did was simply put up the middle finger, it'd be hard to read that as a threat. But remember, the police arrested him for uttering death threats, which means either the police overcharged him if they'd been told what really happened, or the complainant kind of misled the police as to what actually happened. Because they now appear to all agree that what the man did was flip him off. And he called the police, and somehow the police arrested the man for uttering death threats. I'm going to tell you a story now I've never told on this channel, I don't think. So I feel sorry for those who bailed before they got this far. Long before I went to law school in the mid-1980s, I was driving down Rochester Road in Troy, Michigan, on a sunny Saturday afternoon with somebody in my car, and I was in the curb lane coming down the road, and a guy pulled out in front of me in such a way that he almost killed everybody. And I managed to take evasive action and swerve around him, and after I did that, I laid on the horn and I flipped him off. And the guy starts chasing me. He's one of those guys. He's chasing me. He's pulling up on my bumper, flashing his lights, honking, screaming and yelling, making a total ass of himself. And he follows me for over a mile. So I pull into a parking lot of a supermarket, and I manage to get a space right near the front door. And he pulls in, and he jumps out of his car, and he's carrying a weapon. Broad daylight Saturday afternoon in Troy, Michigan. So I duck inside the store, grab the phone, call 911. What's your emergency? There's a guy chasing me with a gun. Parking lot, Kroger's, southbound Rochester Road. Saturday afternoon, bright and sunny. When the guy sees me on the phone, he runs back, jumps in his van, and takes off. Now, of course, the problem for him is I know his license plate number. In fact, I still know it to this day. I could tell you the license plate number right now. So I give him the license plate number. I hang up the phone after giving my information. And when I get home, there's a message for me. Troy police called you. Oh, I call him back. I get the detective. They say, yeah, we got the guy. We arrested him. I said, oh. He goes, yeah, he's not supposed to have that. I said, really? They go, yeah. And so if we turn this over to the prosecutor, are you willing to testify? I said, sure. So is my passenger. So long story, later on, get called to court for the preliminary exam and get called in to testify. And I described the whole thing that happens. And I say at one point I flipped the guy off. And prosecution goes, okay, no further questions, not cross-examination. Defense attorney gets up and goes, what do you mean you flipped him off? I said, I made a gesture at him with my hand where I extended my middle finger. Oh, what does that mean? It means I'm expressing displeasure with his poor driving ability. But what does it mean? What does it mean? I think it's how you express displeasure at people who drive badly in traffic. Guy almost killed me. I was a little wound up at that moment in time, so I flipped him off. What do you mean? What does it mean? You know, what's the translation? What words does it mean? He was actually trying to argue that by me doing that, I had initiated a confrontation that would naturally escalate into life-threatening situations. Make a long story short, after the motion to dismiss was denied, the man pled guilty. He pled guilty, okay? And also the passenger in my car, I believe, testified as well. But the point simply is this, that I, under oath, testified in a court that I have flipped someone off. I never thought I could use that story for anything, but now I can. So if I'd done it in Canada, this judge would have said it's my God-given right. But it is. It's a form of speech. You're making a statement. Most people translate that symbol to mean F you. Okay? What does that mean? It's hit the echelon. It's hit the level. It's hit the point in our society where it's its own statement. What is it? Uttering a death threat? Is it uttering an invitation to duel? No, it's not. It's an insult. And it's, yeah, you're a horrible driver. Go back to driving school is what that was. But the funny part was that when he jumped out of his van and came running at me with something in his hand that he shouldn't have, number one, he wound up losing that, I'm assuming. And number two, he wound up pleading guilty to a crime. So there you go. But that's the story of it's not a crime to give someone the finger. In fact, it's your God-given right in Canada from star.com. Omar Mosler wrote it. Everyone sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. I spent a year in that town one Sunday.